Once a DJ is brought to you with the support of Vinyl Underground Record Store. Since 1993, VU's been shipping new and used underground house, techno, disco, hip-hop, soul and more worldwide from Northampton in the UK. They're your go-to store for upfront releases, repressed classics and deep digging for undiscovered gems, and they're a great crew to deal with who really care about the music and their customers. To show their support to the Once a DJ community, they're giving you 10% off your next order. Just head to vinylunderground.co.uk and use the code ONCEADJ10 at checkout, and you'll also get free UK delivery on all orders over £100. That's ONCEADJ10 at vinylunderground.co.uk.
Nice.
Before we get back to the show, I just wanted to tell you that outside of this podcast, I run a business called Remote Control. That's remote-ctrl.co.uk, and basically it's where I get to do what I love: audio and video production, design management, all of that sort of creative stuff. And the nice thing is, I don't do it alone. Over the years, especially through DJing, I've met some seriously talented people, from producers to designers to videographers and more, and we've built this little network where we can pretty much take on any creative project. So whether you need a podcast edited or a video produced or branding work or whatever, we've got you covered. It's honestly been one of the most rewarding things I've done, working with people I actually respect and enjoy collaborating with. So if you've got a project in mind or you're just curious about what we do, head to remote-ctrl.co.uk and let's chat. No pressure, just good creative work.
Oh, that was nice.
Welcome back to Once a DJ, everyone. Sorry it's taken a while to get a new episode out. I had quite a lot on with the day job and what have you, and just other bits and bobs in life. So I finally just finished editing the latest episode and just realised what a hash I made of the introduction. It really doesn't do the guest justice. And the guest this week is Otchere. He's a pioneering photographer in hip-hop and in London's black music scenes from the 90s onwards, and he's shot pretty much all of your favourite rappers on the way up. He was Metalheadz official photographer, and he's a huge cultural contributor and has some really interesting insights across music and life, really. And he's even had work exhibited in the V&A, certainly has some in the V&A East at the moment. And this is a long and rangy chat where we go into quite a lot of different stuff, and it's one where I've come away from it. Every now and again I come away like really feeling like I've learnt some new things, got some new insights and perspectives on things with people. So this is one of those episodes. So yeah, Otchere, have a listen to it. It's a long one, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope you do too.
Oh, that was nice.
Right, welcome back to Once a DJ, everyone. Our guest today is someone really important in quite a wide range of genres, albeit from a photography point of view. Even if you don't necessarily know his name, you'll know some of his work. Otchere, is it Otchere?
Yeah, Otchere is definitely one way of saying it. I think if you were to sort of talk to a German translator, they would probably say something like Otchere, because there is no C in the Akan language, it's a K, but that's a whole nother story. I would go with Otchere, to be honest with you. Just because that works where we are right now, and the name, I'll come back to this name because it's like what's in a name. But as I said, if in Ghana, where the name comes from, the English missionaries that translated it would have put the Otchere to sort of make it anglify it, so it became Otchere. And if you head into the sort of deep Akan heartland, it's Otchere. And what's happened over time is that's become the new way of saying the language. I always find that really interesting, that there's this sort of liquidity to language that shifts over time and over place. But that's part of the process. I think it's a human thing, really.
Mm. And how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Yes, another day in paradise, I guess. And taking a pause from what it is that I'm doing now, which is basically behind me is the archive, and part of the process now is to sort of unpack the archive to be able to look back over the last 30 years of photographing London, dance, culture, you know, the urban way of life, and making sense of it in some respects, you know, where we came from and where we're going, sort of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
And yeah, like I've mentioned before, you know, you've been around some really interesting movements, documenting them over the years. So what I tend to do on the podcast is just start with your early days. So whereabouts is it that you grew up?
I grew up not too far from where I am right now, which is in Brixton, Stockwell, Vauxhall areas, South London. What is that? That's, they say about sort of London, you know, South London is, most people you know in South London were born in South London, whereas if you had to go somewhere like West London, everyone who lives in West London wasn't necessarily born in West London. So it's what can I say? It's just a village basically. No one really changes around here. Everyone's born here and they live here and they die here.
Oh, nice.
But that's the city of South London. Got no.
Has that got a
complaint.
strong community then?
Yeah, I guess so. But you know, like with anywhere else now, that community is in flux. But definitely growing up, there was definitely a strong sense of community and a strong sense of, you know, what can I say? The best way of describing it is a class divide. You know, it was a working class area, working class people. So very much that's the sort of cultural bedrock, the bottom line, really. And that's in a sense something that I really enjoyed about sort of the jungle scene, was watching us lot who grew up in this environment sort of formulate our own culture around music and around, you know, drum machines, samplers, being quite postmodern about it, you know, taking bits here, sort of realizing that we're in this sort of hybrid universe. And this hybrid universe is essentially a very modern universe, because we are taking different cultures around us and different cultures that influence us, whether it's kung fu films, Japanese manga meets reggae samples, meets drum machines, meets Detroit techno. I think we could all say that conceptually in our minds, we were from the global city. We're from a village in South London called Brixton, but our minds were like in every other village, in every other city around the world, whether it's Brooklyn to Shibuya to Lagos. It's kind of like it's a really interesting urban community that's fully connected to the rest of the world, because we weren't really isolated from the rest of the world, because, you know, I grew up, you know, we had mobile phones, we had the early doors of the internet. You know, there was all this tech that was around us, particularly in South London. And I think I remember vividly, like, there was like a local internet service provider called Direct Connection in South London. And if you had like a Mercury 1-to-1 phone or one of those sort of, you basically had free calls after 7 to other numbers in your own area. And if that meant that the number you're dialing into is on a modem based at Direct Connection, which was in Stockwell, you basically had free internet in the mid-90s. It was just one of those little quirks of just being in the city. And so I really enjoyed that international sort of connections that we could really pick up on quite early. So by sort of 92, 93, internet was in my house, at least through Direct Connection. And you're checking out, you're checking in, and you're engaging with the global world as you see it, knowing that you've got this connectivity of essentially hip-hop culture. If I'm really honest, it was hip-hop culture that gave me and gave us the language to connect with other hip-hop heads around the planet, and then make those connections into actual visits, hanging out, doing stuff, exchanging ideas, exchanging records, exchanging culture.
Can we just rewind then? So before that then, what were your earliest sort of musical influences, and what was that journey to discovering and falling in love with hip-hop then?
Of early musical influences, from what you heard on the estate to what you saw on TV. Particularly for me, I never listened to radio until much later.
Right.
Yeah, so influences were really, for me personally, was just digging through crates. You know, there were so many record shops all around. Look, I live in Vauxhall at the time of like the early 80s. I could ride my bike to Soho. I could go to Groove Records. I could go through the racks. I could buy what I wanted. And essentially, I was, I didn't realize it at the time, but these are like connoisseur shops of like the culture. You'll, Groove Records, all the shops in Soho, Black Market, all of them. I remember going to Groove Records and I couldn't even see over the counter. I was like, 12, 13 years old, and the counter was so high I couldn't see over it. I had to sort of go, can I re-rec him? I know you got soul, please, 12-inch. And there was a granny in the back, and this granny would sell you the record. It turns out this granny was the godmother of Excel Records, basically, because she birthed half of them. So it goes on and on and on. So that's the musical culture I got, was from record shops. And that comes from collecting. That doesn't come from necessarily. I was influenced by hip hop because I was consuming it. It was just there to be consumed. It was the cool shit at the time, and it made sense. And so Groove Records was a big influence for me. That all my pocket money went there until they shut down, and then other places in Soho opened up to me. But so early influences were literally going around record shops and buying stuff off the wall, and essentially just been playing it, hearing it, and going, that's cool. And so if I did the circuit of, let's say, Groove Records for the hip hop, I wasn't really into house. There wasn't really anything else until I think MASH came along on Oxford Street. And I remember hearing Shut Up and Dancing there for the first time around about 89. And that sort of got me into the breakbeat side of things, going through that record store on Oxford Street. So you can see how the culture was not necessarily, you just listen to music. No, the music was aligned to shops, and the shops are aligned to culture, and the culture are aligned to actually hanging out with people. And, like, I don't know about you, but this might sound creepy in a modern age, but you might go to a shop because there's a really nice girl in there that you fancy. That wasn't creepy. That was natural. And she kind of was cool, and you were cool, and she was smart as fuck, and she put you onto stuff. Like, you respected their intelligence and all the rest of it. You grew up around people that knew shit, and that was that's how you measured it, and new people, and people like that would always put you on, so that's the culture of growing up around music. So I suppose I'll be collecting 7 inches until 12 inches came along, and it grew from there. Red Records, Dub Vendor. There was a shop inside Brixton Tube Station. You come up the stairs, come up the escalators, come through the ticket barriers. On the right hand side was the newsagent. On the left hand side was a shop run by Zebedee, and he would sell the weirdest, just UK 12 inches and a couple of US imports. But he had taste, and that shop would be going off on a Friday night. But that was another time.
What? So would people be like partying in there late then?
Yeah. Just after work. You come up through the tube, you pop into the record shop. And I'd say party is a strong word. No, the music's loud, but people are collectors. So you play the record loud, and then you put your hand up to say, that's the record I want. And if it's sold out there, and then it's sold. It's like a bidding war. It's close to a bidding war than it is to a party. You're there to buy tunes. You're quite serious about it too.
Yeah, it's such a different time, isn't it? Now, you just hop on Discogs if your wallet's fat enough.
Yeah.
Whereas back then, it's like you had to be there at the time if you wanted to get that record.
Yeah, and someone had to put you onto that record. So it wasn't, you couldn't, unless you knew so-and-so's got a new album coming out and you knew the distributor, it was still waiting for the shop for it to drop in the shop before you could get your hands on it.
Yeah. So just aside from that then, when did photography become... I guess either a hobby or a career for you? When did that come into your life?
Yeah, I think photography was pretty much around the same time, late 80s, early 90s. It sort of followed on from the obsession with vinyl. With the obsession with vinyl comes an obsession with tape and cassette tape, particularly different types of recording formats. And then photography is another type of recording format. So you sort of got obsessed by that and the different types of film available. So that was roughly around in the late 80s when you could, my friend of mine's granddad passed away and left him like a Praktika camera. And then we sort of picked up the camera and started playing with it. And it seemed pretty obvious to me then that it was a great tool for recording what was going on around you at the time. And I suppose for me, the first set of pictures I took were of the trainers that I'd bought, which was like a pair of like Nike Air Revolutions, which blew my mind because they were featured in Do the Right Thing the following year. But so it's sort of, and that was important, like documenting these products, particularly as the products were, I don't know, as far as I could tell, was like innovations, like coming out the 70s, like a Nike, a pair of trainers with a bubble in it were mind blowing compared to like the plimp soles of the years before. So these things was sort of struck me as, we looked, and that was interesting for me then, because like we felt and we wanted to be really, at one point, really modern, like Nike Air Jordans, the purple tracksuit that you picked up from MASH, and a Naf shirt that was all quite modern in terms of overprint and the way the garments looked and the silhouettes that you had, and wearing sports stuff as if it's like connoisseur stuff in the early 90s was really a rarefied moment, and I kind of really wanted to document that. I thought we were wild and fresh and beautiful, and obviously, I'm conscious in my own head of like things like punk and the iconography of punk and how that was visualized. And for me, given how colorful we were, it was all in color. It was all about just how like flowers, like, and then the Daisy Age came along, and then it really was like all about color, and that was 91 De La Soul. And that was a real cementing of like hip hop as a revolutionary thinking, or hip hop as more than just a musical format, but rather a culture with pillars and points of view. And then with that in your system, when jungle comes along and you start to realize that you're formulating your own localized culture, that you kind of want to embed hip hop values in it. You want it to have more than one aspect to it, that it's not just a music thing. It's not just disco. It's actually bigger than that. We can morph into the space that we need. And for us, it was drum, it was bass, it was large spaces where thousands of us gather, and good drugs. And then you could actually grow spiritually, physically, and mentally as well.
So just when you started photography, what you've got there with photography and record collecting is two quite expensive pastimes. Was it hard to kind of prioritize one over the other with, like, say, getting film or getting the latest records?
Not really. I felt like, quite early on, you realize that if you're going to put in a tax return, then you have to at least say that buying records and buying film, you need to get a discount on that. And then the other part of the job of buying records or buying film is getting as close to the source as possible, so it's the cheapest value you could. And for me, from records, it was about getting close to record companies so I could pick up promos and go through the racks. So eventually half the records I want, I don't have to buy anymore because I worked out where to get them from for free. And the same could be said for film as well. Yeah.
So it sounds like you were pretty savvy from an early age.
Yeah.
Is this, like, in Spirit of the Lens, you mentioned that your mum was really savvy as well. Did she kind of like put that into you?
Yeah, I guess you're surrounded by sort of survival instincts, and you're surrounded by sort of scarcity, in a sense that you realize that time is precious and things are valuable, and you can't let these chances pass you by. And so that's the sort of realization of also, at some point spending time in West Africa and realizing just how easy it is to have your back against the proverbial wall, and how you basically have to cover your back. In other words, you've got to keep thinking ahead of the curve, keep moving ahead in such a way as you don't get caught out, with your proverbial back against the wall, because you've got no options for yourself. So in terms of sort of like records, which is like really important, really valuable in my opinion, because it's they're sort of statements of fact, a bit like photography. This is like the truth. And ultimately, if you're going to sort of be savvy about something, why not be savvy about something that's good for everybody? Let's figure this one out. Because I don't think people fully understand how gaslit we are in a contemporary society that we live in. Like, everything's like, we saw it in music quite early on. If you got the vinyl version, and then years later Robert Plant decides he wants to remaster all the Led Zeppelin albums and strips out half the bass and half the kick drum because he doesn't like the drummer anymore. Over time, these records lose their power because they get constantly sort of refiddled with. And you're starting to see that more and more in films, where everything's been retconned, history's been retconned. There is no fact anymore. We're post-fact, we're post, this is it. And so, and back then, what's that? There's a Michael Jackson album where in the first pressing, there's no hand claps in it. And they decided, oh shit, we need hand claps. So they had to repress the record with hand claps in it. And then they recalled the first bunch, but a few went out. And so you always got evidence in vinyl or in photography or in traditional places. But for me, now I realize that holding on to these things and caring about these things was very much about actually realizing that we're going to face some kind of shit in the future where we need the truth to help us not go insane. And it kind of feels like we're getting to that point now where it's like, actually, we're all insane. We don't know shit anymore. And now I don't know if that's like, I was wrong to try and hold back the tide, because even in science, things we knew as facts aren't facts. They change every fucking day. So it's like, are we just going to live in this floating point universe where nothing's real anymore and you don't know or not? And I don't know. Sometimes you have to follow your heart on that one. And sometimes it's nice to pull out a record or look at a piece of film from the past and know that that's exactly what it is. You can rescan it. You can look at it again and just see something that's an unfiltered view of another time, whether it's a tune or a picture or and I think holding on to that, I just got obsessed. I think it must have been from school when I just got obsessed about in libraries. I worked in the library when I was in school, and I've kind of saw the power of what that is, and I think that's where I'm at now with that. Like, after all these years of just wanting to document things and hold them preciously and dearly, it's now important that they're now shared with us and alongside stories that go with these pictures of whether it's Goldie and the Metalheadz or and the spirit behind things, like the reason why we needed to dance. It's like you watch those 80s films now about, hey ma, I just want to dance, and no, you can't dance, dancing's bad. Like, just to make people think that, hold on, people used to think like that. Like, if they saw like 20 kids dancing in the park, they thought the fucking world was about to collapse. Like, get over yourselves, like that. It's nice to be reminded that when we were released from that kind of mental bondage, that people did some great shit, and drum and bass and jungle culture is the great shit that we did.
Yeah. So when you were learning photography, how much of that was kind of studying books and things, and how much was just like just finding your way around a camera and like just working out for yourself about light? And because I'm trying to understand how lenses work with f-stops and all this sort of thing at the moment, and I find it really confusing. Whereas if I just spent some time with the camera, I might go, oh well, if I change that to that, then this happens.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say this much, that you're only as good as a camera you got. So whatever you got is what you got. And it's not necessarily about the camera, it's more about where your intention and where you are with it. And I remember vividly with that, something like the Metalheadz. I'd been shooting in clubs for a little while, and I realized there's limitations to shooting in clubs, i.e. it's dark in there and you can't see shit. So how do you focus? So essentially, I bought the Canon EOS 10 because it had an infrared focus beam on it, which meant that if you're in complete darkness, it could just focus on anything, alert you with a signal, and then you fire. So, and it was almost instantaneous, almost split second. So, which was really good. So you could almost hear the thing come in, point it in the right direction, just fire, and the flash would kick in. Kick down. Very small, very compact camera. It suited what it had to do. Yeah, and that was quite specific. If your intention is just to take pictures of your like 6-year-old baby or 6-month-old baby, then there is a camera specifically great for that. It's probably got Daffy Duck on the front of it, and every time the kid sees it, he giggles and you snap away and you got yourself a picture. In other words, these are just tools. I kind of worked out very quickly that more like an artist does, like you sort of, everything's a tool. So you want to tell this story, you find a tool that helps you tell the story best. And in most cases, different cameras are built for different things. And that's really sort of an interesting legacy of, particularly British photographers, like someone like Martin Parr, where you can see him build a whole body of work because there's a camera film combo that he's using that makes colors pop in a very specific way. He's just employing techniques just to do the work. If he goes to Afghanistan, he'll have a self-portrait made. There's kind of black and white self-portraits where they paint pink blusher on your cheeks to make you look like you're, weird. But the point is, every photography is cultural. Different people have different things they bring to the table, and you can almost read a series of books in any well-informed library or any half-decent bookshop or magazine store, and get the knowledge you need. And I think it's something to be said about magazines is that you would go to Tower Records in the 90s, and they had one of the largest magazine collections in Europe at the time. And you could spend an afternoon to early evening. So you get there around about 4 o'clock. You might have a date around 7 or 8, but you go to Tower Records, Piccadilly Circus, go to the basement, go to What Camera, What Hi-Fi, Japanese camera magazines, the most bizarre collection of obsessive, randomized stuff going. And you could pretty much learn the world. It's like it was better than the internet because there was no like distractions as such, you know. So you can pretty much go to the camera section and just pick up techniques and pick up like look at different and like go to Mixmag and see what all the other photographers in the raves are doing, and then modify yourself against their techniques. And that was it. I did study photography, but the thing is, the lesson learned is really in the field, where you are talking to other photographers and looking at their setups and actually sort of, you know, chatting to them and getting to know other photographers and techniques. And particularly myself as well, coming up through the 90s, I would be part of camera clubs, or Photo Fusion being one in Brixton that I was part of, which is a darkroom essentially. So you're constantly shooting, printing, and working alongside other photographers in a communal space while you're making your work, looking at each other's work. And I still do that to this day. Like I still use some of the communal darkrooms across London to primarily engage with a new generation of shooters and have conversations with them, because I think we learn more through, you know, human interaction than we do necessarily in books. I do teach, and I don't teach through book. I teach through praxis. I teach through going for long walks, you know, like that's essentially most of my best workshops are my walks right now, which could have up to 90 people turn up so we can just walk. And learning is done within a 2 to 3 hour process, where you shoot, you process your film, you make a contact sheet, you see the holy trinity of photography, the camera, the negative, and the print. That's the process.
Nice.
So sometimes when you shoot and you're learning how to use a camera, sometimes it's best to have an intention before you even get to that point, so you know what you're trying to get to before you even start. And unfortunately with digital, because you're not making a print until you lock it into paper form, you haven't completed the circle. You're just staring at images on the screen. You can't even take it in. You know, if you need a plug to look at your work, is it your work?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's the sort of issue with, that's the immediacy of photography is the print. Please, whatever you do in this life, go to the print, and you'll learn over the course of time whether you've improved or whether your camera was bad or good, or eventually you get to miss certain lenses over time because you couldn't see what they were doing for you at the time they were doing it for you. Then you buy another lens because someone says this lens is amazing, and you realize, actually, I like the bad lens. The bokeh in the corners is really quite nice. I generally shoot things, find new toys, shoot on them for a day or two, put a couple of rolls through them, look at their flaws, you know, shoot in extremes, shoot at 2.8, shoot at a fast shutter speed, shoot on a grey day, shoot on a bright day, shoot certain colors, just play with it. And essentially it will come to you what it is and whether or not it sits with you, whether or not it's your friend or not, or just weird. Is it the weird lens?
Yeah. So how did you first get into doing photography events and musicians?
Yeah, I think it was for the jungle era. I started shooting in raves. I started getting in touch with all the raves across London because I kind of really thought they were amazing spaces to play in, like the Laserdrome in Peckham, which was basically a tag space. You know, it looked like an adventure playground indoors, and you'd run around and go wild, but they also had a sound system and they were playing jungle and they didn't have any drinks licenses, and it just seemed like really exciting. So I'd shoot for the promoters, and it gave me some experience, like shooting a space empty, shooting at people in it, getting to know the promoters. They're using some of my images on their flyers, then other promoters needing images on their flyers because like, oh shit, you can take images in the club, let's put that on our flyers. And I was like, yes, I'm that guy. So from the early 90s, I was like, well, early mid 90s, whatever, I was shooting for Thunder and Joy, a couple of other sort of 1 or 2 other promoters, and just really putting their raves in context. And the service was to make sure that we didn't insult the people that came there to dance and have a good time, that we had something that they can feel proud of and they can see themselves on the flyer and they could like, yeah, that's me. I'm having a great time. So that was that. And then it sort of ultimately, the last sort of big one I did in the 90s was the Metalheadz, because it sort of led my way into working with Goldie and documenting his club, at which point I'd crystallized that sort of club photography for me. And then once I'd got that under my belt, I got a chance to work with the producers and then sort of start to create their iconography, start to work out ways of, again, realizing that photography was used in such a way as to promote the culture, because this was set against the backdrop of like the Daily Star taking pictures of drunken women and saying junglist Nazi techno in Brixton. It was a Daily Star headline, and it was just really insulting, really demeaning. Again, this idea that the media will just attack young people dancing like there's something wrong with us. Why would you go out and dance? And so my job was to make sure that I didn't come across that people actually went out, young people went out and had a good time, and they didn't go out and kill each other or rape each other. They actually just went out and danced. And there's something purely magical about the act of dancing all night, particularly after midnight on a full moon. Something happens to you. Who knew? You know, so
do you find it weird when if I look at sort of footage of DJ sets and stuff now, and the DJ like have everyone in and amongst them and stuff you know, say some of the stuff you get on YouTube, but the crowd just isn't. They just seem so reserved comparatively to what clubbing was.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a mixed bag, you see, because I don't know if you remember back then, like clubbing in London was wild, and then you'd go to Paris and you'd look around you and go, no one's doing anything. Everyone's smoking and talking while the DJ's playing his heart out. And this was mid-90s Paris before. And those Daft Punk kids really weren't really rocking crowd. Like the only time I've seen them like wow people out is when they did the American stuff in the noughties. But anyway, the point is that I realized it was like a cultural thing, that we had something, we were dancing, we were in the moment, we were having it, and then something weird things happen. For me, visually, once the smoking has stopped, the clubs didn't look as exciting. Because smoke in the atmosphere makes things look really edgy, makes the lights look really nice. And then Red Bull changed the energy in the room, which was weird, and then the clubs became cleaner, so there was less.
What do you mean about Red Bull changing the energy?
Yeah, Red Bull changed everything. When Red Bull became legal, because it was illegal for a long time, wasn't it? And
I don't know. I didn't realise.
Yeah, Red Bull was illegal. It was illegal, but it was banned in this country. You couldn't get Red Bull anywhere. And then suddenly Red Bull became legal as a drink, or they took the taurine out, or something was replaced, or whatever. And then it sort of, and then then you started having Red Bull in your drink rather than rum and Coke. Even the Coke recipe changed, because Coke used to have obviously cocaine in it, but it also used to have cola nuts in it, which was a stimulant, which they took out in the mid-90s as well. So Coke stopped working as a experience. Red Bull replaced it in the late 90s, I think. And I don't know. I think that's a spurned garage. Like there was a whole series of changes within what people consumed while they were dancing that changed the nature of the music and the people there, which was a mixed bag. In some cases, the nicer, cleaner, carpeted clubs with your Red Bull or your champagnes were just a sexier sound, like the girls went there, and the grimier, edgier, dirtier clubs were just more male. I'm losing my train of thought here, but they also reminded me of the time when kids would go out and listen to drum and bass DJs that were producers that only played their own tracks. They wouldn't play to the crowd, like they wouldn't play a set of all the great hits at the time. They'd only play their own music. Obviously, Bookham was famous for this, and that was fine because it was only Bookham. But by the end of the 90s, every main DJ was only playing their own music. And then that meant the only people turning up were other producers who were just there to sort of like watch, I don't know, XYZ happen. But I'm not, what I wanted to get to was that over time, the trend to actually be engaged in the dance or to be slightly aloof from the dance swings around, I think.
Right.
And I say because I would agree with you until I think I saw the Fred Again Alexander Palace performances, and I was like, yeah, these kids are engaged fully. This was only last year. And is that because Fred Again is a more conscious clubber who's like, giving his fans water and performing in a very specific way, still having that sort of boiler room situation where there's people behind you as well as in front of you? Or is there more consideration for the sound dynamics that every corner of the room is so beautifully tuned that you're going to have the perfect audio experience, even if it's digital? That's sort of starting to make me wonder, because there was a time as well when I sort of, around about 2009, 2011, I'd go to clubs and all the kids were bunched up against each other. Like there was no room, like they didn't respect personal space. And I thought that was weird. And that came and went. So it's like, I think every generation, at least within every new genre, changes the way they party within that genre. The problem being is England hasn't invented the genre in a long time. I think the last time we came out with something was dubstep. I don't know what we've done since.
Yeah, is that because you were talking about that sort of cross-pollination that happened in the early days of jungle being formed? With that, I guess you had really distinct things, I guess, that fed into it. But now just everyone's influence is so broad with streaming, because you're not getting handed tapes from your mates of certain clubs, or it's not, take this album, take this single, check it out, so it's like everyone's just influenced by everything. So like, how does a new genre come around now that's so, like, has its own identity?
Yeah, this is it. And I think it's still, we're starting to realize that everyone's become like, you imagine the curated thing of listen to this tape, get a real sense of what was going on in it, try and mimic it yourself, play it to the same set of heads in a bigger club, and then have the reaction, whether they all go off having heard the song for the first time and going, oh my fucking God, what is this? It's that side of the chain that we've lost. We've lost that ability to feed back into our mates without it just going off somewhere, so that we can then get their approval before we then move on to the next stage of it. Because we'd always be sharing these tapes in a way like, and making our own little dubs or our own little edits and then playing them back to ourselves, and then it becomes the tune. Like, oh, I flipped it, I did this with it, that feedback loop isn't happening. But when I see it happen, and I only see it recently in like places like Africa, where there's so many more spaces to just randomly dance and rock up, that DJs are forced to play more and more tunes that were better than the last one, where the sonics were deeper than the last one. So the DJs are forced to really break records, break tunes to the crowd. We don't have that. When we go out now, we just want a good DJ who can just hold our attention long enough, not for us not to pull out our phones. Whether or not they can break new records, I just don't know. But the last time I had a good dance was probably the BBE set recently, the last bank holiday. Kenny Dope was a bunch of hip hop DJs playing house. Kenny Dope, DJ Spinner, Victor, was Victor Duplay there? Benji B was there. It was
such a good lineup.
It was a good lineup. It was a good, solid, veteran, at least 30-year plus DJs playing modern music on a nice sound system. And it made it, and it did that thing that only house can do, because house is a feeling, and it really gave you that feeling in the house where it just builds you up crescendo, and then mellows you down again, but slowly building you up across the whole night. And you just reminded just how important it is to be a great curator in this role. And I think throughout a conversation, I think we're constantly talking about our mates who inform us, but these were heads. These were kids who were obsessed with one thing or another, who would inform our sense of, like, we might not be into Morrissey, but he's a fucking Morrissey head, and he did play the best Morrissey record you've ever heard, and you thought, all right, I like Morrissey. But you needed that mate who will just line you up with that. And DJs still have that power. They can still know how to put the record in there to take you to other place, which is still in you.
And I suppose you've got now, when in day-to-day life do you ever have to be subjected to more than 2 seconds of a song that you're not enjoying?
Yeah.
Because you can just skip it straight away.
Yeah.
And also, how much of the time do you listen to things in like good fidelity? So much of the time we're listening Bluetooth. We're not even on like wired headphones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's all sorts of challenges.
Yeah, that's it. And those big rigs are lovely. Like headphones, I hear people actually mix down on headphones. Crazy. Crazy. Like, what are you, radio listeners? And there's a diversity of listening space, which was we were really conscious of it in the 90s, like hip hop and the Jeep mix. The mix specifically for your car that has more subs than it needs, but those frequencies are fine because in your car you got subs in the back and you just want to rattle everyone's windows as you drive down the street while Redman's screaming in your ear. And then you got the radio edit, which was like slightly sort of thinner, so it cuts through. Slightly smaller edit, cut out the intro bits. Those sort of like nuancy things are just lost now, and I think that's a shame. But and hit records, essentially hit grooves are 2-minute long loops. But we live in the age of, the loop. It is where we're at, and also in society. Like you'd think, like Western society's in a doom loop. We are so into loops now. Like even now we make loops just so we can listen to stuff on loop. Like I find myself going to the drum machine just sampling grooves so I can just listen to the loop because it seems that's where we are. We just love loops now and track pads and all that.
So loops is an interesting one because I was chatting to a mate the other day about what do you think's the best loop that a producer's caught. So for me, like No ID, like the Common Resurrection loop, is it Ahmed Jamal? That, I think just for an isolated loop, I could listen to that for probably like 6 hours.
Yeah.
I'd be happy with that. With or without the drums, with or without lyrics, I couldn't care less. It's just such a good loop, and like Arrested Development, the second half of the Bob James phrase, stuff like that. So
and
I mean I make loops, but it's because I'm not capable of turning it into anything more.
But there's joy in that, and I think they found it. Like the new generation of hip hop, like Alchemist stuff, where it's just loops. It's just perfect loops, and
from insanely dug records as well.
Yeah, insanely dug records, and no kick drum, and the vocal is up front. And it's interesting because your mix down's more actually interesting because you've got less to mix, and the voice and where you place the voice and the sound effects. Oh, it's really all that space you're playing with now again.
Yeah, I really want to understand Alchemist's audio chain.
Yeah.
If that's like his flow, because why is it that his samples sound so good?
Yeah.
Is he on like just an incredible turntable?
Yeah. Or is it just polished? I would say, it's funny. There's a little thing someone was saying about MJ Cole, and one of the producers like, "Why is it your sounds better than mine in the club?" And he goes, "Well, you know what I do, innit? I just lay everything flat."
Yes, I saw that. Was it Plastician?
Yeah, that's it. And I was like, I bet you Alchemist is on that. He's on the flat, just less but flat. Just that raw dog, the whole thing. One Shaw needle, one technique turntable, raw dog.
Well, it's like the other thing I think is as well, like just going back to the mixing and stuff, like Pete Rock and Common's album.
Yeah,
I think it's one of the best of the sort of Elder Statesman albums. Yeah. But if you listen to it, it's like it just doesn't quite sound like a Pete Rock production.
Yeah.
And I think all it is like layering and arrangement and stuff, but it sounds like it's mixed for earphones.
Yes.
Like the cleanness of it and stuff, it just misses that grit.
Yeah, it does miss that grit. And there was that something about, look, there's a certain school of New York hip hop which is made for headphones, so that the vocals like in your ear, so that on a Monday morning you feel like someone's just giving you a mantra to work with, as opposed to sort of the sort of bigger mixes, the LA mixes, which is like made for your car, so that you've got the drop top down and all that space, the rim shot cuts through. Those different placements I always found specific to the cultures that were making those different schools of hip hop, and how all that sort of crossed over particularly after 9/11, when all the New York guys just left and went to LA, and then Shuffle turned up on your iPod, and then that was it. We just became everything all at once. And and then suddenly we started to admire all the other people that just didn't sort of go with technological determinism, like the MF Dooms, have just stayed in a particular lane, dug in deeper, and just carried on and found more disciples that followed that sound. And then it just great. And Doom is interesting because you can see a line from Doom from KMD on Elektra Records, where it's got the same pressing technology as a Pete Rock and CL Smooth pressing, fat, juicy, all the sub basses are there, and those Elektra presses were beautiful because they had brand Nubian as well, and they're and you'd hear like record loops but mastered to perfection. Even the scratches were nice, just the top ends are taken off, it was just nice and muted, and then the vocal will be above that, and it's like, oh, genius. All the way through to a post, just the stuff he does one with Madlib, with Dilla. You're like, wow, there is a continuum. But I suppose the only thing that changed was it went down to cassette form. You sort of have the big studio and you shrink it down back to cassette, and then you expand again. It's really interesting, that contraction that occurs. And I think Dilla pioneered that for me, because you'd hear all the what you could hear the Dilla when he just had only synths, like only pure, like the Frank and Dank album, just pure, just original synths, levels flat, just straight to tape, versus rough draft, straight to cassette, done in his bedroom in a hospital, chopping up breaks. That's hip hop, isn't it? Where you swell and contract depending on where your money's at.
Just on Doom, then, did you ever work with him?
No, unfortunately not. It's Doom. I knew when Doom was around, I just didn't know where he was. People would be like, "Oh yeah, I saw Doom the other day in a newsagent." Fuck. And it sounded mythical, and it was true. I just didn't realize it was in Leeds. That was the only thing. Otherwise, I would have just stalked him and tracked him down, caught that train to Leeds, and just go to the local beer shop and work out which newsagent's serving him his beer, his old gold.
Yeah. So this brings us on to talking about hip hop and stuff. Then, so just in your book, I was just noticed in there that reading the bit about when you shot Aaliyah. Photographed Aaliyah, I should say. You were still at college at that time. Yeah. So you were kind of like young. Did you go straight from school to like straight from education?
Yeah. School would have ended in 1990. College would have been to 92. Roughly around 93, 94, I think I shot Aaliyah. And so that would have been college, uni, sort of like that hangover year where you worked out what to do with your life. You signed on.
Were you in London?
Yes.
Still,
yeah, totally in London. Or I never really left London. I sort of when I went to New York to shoot in New York, it's really because it was 2 to 1 to the pound. So $2 to every.
Had you got work over there? So just to understand your timeline then, because you mentioned about the internet access.
Yeah.
Was that the catalyst for you connecting to this level of rapper and singer?
Yeah, basically, yeah. We were connected in the sense that I could get in touch with management. So when I went to New York, particularly when it was 2 to 1 to the pound, you'd get a cheap ticket on Air India. That was painful. Trust me, that was painful. Anyway,
were you flying via India?
No, via Canada. Jesus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was the cheapest ticket. It's like the equivalent of Air Norway was today. Sort of cheapest ticket to New York was always being the Air India ticket, and you just get there and stay in a dive hotel. But you'd already made your contacts and you'd already sent fax. Americans were mainly about faxes. They kind of took you seriously if you sent a fax. So thankfully, the Apple modem could do faxes as well. Just random. So anyway, like even to this day, if you want to rent a flat in Japan, you still need to send the fax. Yeah, don't sleep on faxes. They really could. Powerful things they are. So I could make connections, say that I was coming in, meet up with certain rappers and DJs and just photograph them while I would go to New York and exploit the fact that it was cheaper to be in New York than it would be to be in London at the time because everything was half the price. And you'd pick up your records and you'd pick up everything. And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful time to exploit that thing. And I always did. Like, it's always been my barometer. Whenever the dollar goes $2 to the pound, I'm out. What's interesting now in America is really expensive. America is just a very expensive place. Like, I thought it was like $15 for an egg cress sandwich in Pret. It's just it's embarrassing the amount of inflation they're going through. So at those points in the 90s, I would always go to America. I'd always make the visits. I'd always connect with them in such a way that I could just meet people the same way we, meeting Jay-Z in 95, as an independent rapper, me working with Raucus, because I would, get in touch, bring music over from the UK because they're the drum and bass outfit that they wanted to sign on, that were based across the road from me, and I would go to America with the Dats and vice versa. So we're constantly sort of like exporting British culture in exchange for importing American culture. That would always be my thing. So I sort of, I took advantage of those things, and mainly being based in London meant that I could just get on the plane and go quite easily.
So were you going independently and then selling the photographs to publishers?
Yeah, basically. Like, I'd say to Mix America, I'm going to be in New York. Is there anything you want doing? They'll be like, no. And then 5 minutes later, they'll call me on the phone going, are you in New York? I'm like, yeah. Okay, cool. Could you shoot Fatboy Slimmy's #1? And he happens to be there. Like, cool, done. Let's just do this. And then I'll then sell photographs of people like that to other magazines across in America and vice versa. So I'll be shooting for Herb magazine as well. And people forget, like, early part of my career, I'm shooting for flyers. Middle part of my career, I'm shooting for magazines, informing the culture, and also working with underground and overground magazines. I think by 2000, I was out of that because most of the culture was dominated by Esquire, GQ, and all the big publishers. By 2000s, hip-hop culture was so pop, it would be covered by bigger magazines. You wouldn't be shooting for an underground magazine called Touch or On The Go or, Style and the Family Tunes, which was a magazine in Germany, or Rap Pages or whoever. Because it's a bit like, I'm out here just literally chasing my favorite rappers, MCs and DJs across most genres that I can think of at the time. So I'd even be photographing people like Ahmed Van Helden, who I thought was amazing in terms of how because the hip hop house thing really was like a thing I wish hip house was a thing-ish, and it's still there. But as I said, if you hear hip hop DJs play house, you are hearing house as it should be played. Yeah, because hip hop DJs understand the roots of house, and it wasn't necessarily their music, but they always had cousins that played house, so they know what house is. Particularly Latin DJs like Kenny Dope, where house and disco and the dance side of the culture is always in them, and that is super. Anyway, still want to document all of that because I fell in love with a club called Body and Soul in New York, and it was the most amazing experience when it came to hearing dance music and hearing house music and hearing how house isn't just duff. It's not a force to the floor. It's a feeling. And only the DJ and Frankie Knuckles and all these house DJs will say they brought the feeling to you, and they somehow mixed it so seamlessly that you couldn't see the joins. All you felt was this feeling.
Yeah, I think with like your Todd Terrys and your Armand Van Heldens and people like that, it's how they work with samples as well.
Yeah, exactly. And also stabby samples, like you hit that pad, like dan. And it's just you want that energy, and then the drum breaks are just there to support that. And when our man sort of like started infecting all the like A-Train and all the new generation of hip hop kids, and they started making house, it's like, okay, great, yeah, they get it. You just taught them how to get it, how to chop up, how you chop up samples for house and hip hop is kind of similar, but how you arrange is different.
Yeah, like hip hop's kind of my hip hop and digging and funk and soul and stuff. That's kind of my first love, really. Yeah. Like I got into like happy hardcore and like house and stuff when I was younger, but then when I found hip hop and funk and soul and stuff, that was kind of it for quite a long time. Yeah. But then when you've spent all this time trying to make loops that sound like Premier or whoever, when you then go, actually, I'm going to try and make something that's a bit more dancey and up-tempo, it's just a lot of fun to make something with that sort, or to try and make something with that sort of energy.
Yeah, it is fun. It definitely is fun. Yeah, I think you should allow yourself that fun. I think it was good to see it in the flesh, where you see these guys like Kenny Dope and all these guys having fun, and
Yeah.
it didn't seem as labored. Like when they're playing 7 inches, it seems a bit like, whoa, you guys are working now. Like I see you sweating, I just slapping on the sevens, just trying to find the perfect break and cut. Like, mate, you're just killing yourself to make it sound perfect. Whereas when they take a step back in the house, they're like, oh, just slapping 2 tunes together, and or those bass lines are in key. Let's just see where this goes. That's just fun, and I feel, yeah, I think we all need that. You know, that sort of like, you know, like if you've been working on a tune for so long, it's always like, certainly when I'm playing on the MPC, there's always like another page I open to just throw random ideas and just to hear the quirky break, just to hear a break chopped up.
Well, like with my MPC at the moment, I'm trying to work out how to use it live while DJing. To sample and loop live, but then how to like match the tempos quickly and stuff. How to try and like load in a load of breaks. I'm you know, using the input with the through on it as like so that I can use that on a send to add delays and add low pass filters and stuff. I'm doing all this stuff, and why am I doing it?
No, I think you're onto something there, but I think you're about sort of like 6 months away from the Chemical Brothers, you know what I mean, or a guy called Gerald, because everyone of that generation have just gone into that mindset where it just becomes the long loop, like, and it's fun because you need the crowd to help you develop the wave. So I remember studying a guy called Gerald, and he was like bringing his 808s, his 303s, and rigging them all up and just pressing on, and that was it. That would be the whole night. And then it's just oscillating, dropping things out, just letting and then the crowd, like, and then suddenly you cut something out where you only got the hi-hat going, and the crowd start cheering. And you're like, oh, fuck it, let's just let the hi-hat go for a minute, bring in the clap. Yeah, let's go. And then you're playing. Then you're just playing. But I think, A, you got to do it live, because it could only be done live. And B, I think it's more fun when you jam it out. So you have, certainly my thing was, either hip hop breaks like Dilla-esque samples, which I tried out at the hip hop chip shop, and if you can pioneer it, please do it. Dilla-esque samples with a trumpet player to help with the bridges, you know, when you're bridging from one thing to another. So there's a live thing with, as you said, delays that are in time, so that when they hit one note, you could just drop the drums back in, it'll be fine, you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of leaving all that synchronization so that there's a live mic that's always kind of charged, or you can that can be affected by them. And it's really a jamming session. It's like a hip hop jamming session. It kind of reminds me of what the Beastie Boys probably did when they went back to instruments. They just sort of just unplugged everything else and turned everything else on and just started jamming into the room. But you have to play into a room with that setup. It's a room thing. And I've seen a guy called Gerald do it, and I'm like, it's the room that makes it make sense. Because as you said, you think you're flying blind until you just hit that bass note, and it just fucking flies across the room, and someone starts losing their mind to it. Like, here we go.
Yeah. I think with that sort of stuff as well, you've got to, like, one of my mates he's helped me out with a couple of tunes before, and he's got the big like modular synth sort of setup and stuff like that.
Yes.
And I think when you're doing that and when you're chaining things together and stuff, you've just got to have absolute mastery of your setup and understand if this goes wrong, then I've got to do this to bring it in and stuff like that. It's complicated stuff.
It is complicated, but you know, Lee Perry has taught us the way. If you just strip it down to 8 channels, 1 delay, 1 reverb, you'll boil it down to the perfect thing. And Lee Scratch Perry did the ultimate thing one year where you could go into the South Bank and he would have his master tapes running, and you can make your own dubs of his tracks. And so everything was on like 16 channels. Bass line, drums, everything else. Delays are already preset, and all you have to do is punch in and punch out.
Right.
And that's dub. And then you put, you know, and then you can turn the delays up. So like, it just goes on and on, and then drop the bass back in again. And it just made you realize that he just had the setup so tight that all you have to do is have fun. The drummer will come in, put his sets down. The bass will come in, put his sets down, put all like 8 parts down, and then just play with it, have different singers come in and dance in different ways to that song. But yeah, I wish that I was just going to say, I wish that for all museums, that if we have a music museum, that we can actually have, like, we can do our own dubs, you can have access to the tapes, you know. That's a lovely thing to have one day for all of us. And obviously those of us who are into editing and somehow can get into those stems, as they call it, and make their own boogie edits. Great. Good times. I don't have the patience for it, but good times. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I've got a couple of the Mad Professor Marvin Gaye dubs, and they're so nice.
Thank you for putting me onto that. Yeah, because I've only been picking up on the John Morales edits. But if you say Mad Professor or Large Professor?
Mad Professor.
Okay. God, I can imagine what he can do with that.
Yeah. It's just, it's still got like the sort of movement and energy whilst being really dubby as well. It's really nicely done.
Yeah, and it sounds good on a big rig. Do you get a chance to play out much?
No, not much. I always would like to play out more. I'm in this sort of thing. Like, I used to play out more, and then I started doing some stuff with a band that wasn't necessarily where my heart was, and then doing my own sort of DJing fell back a bit because it was a lot of fun and
social.
And, it was good at the time, but then like you kind of look back after and it's like I could have like maybe made some momentum with DJing, and now being the age I am and stuff, you're trying to like get back into it and being somewhere where there's not a huge call for what I do. Yeah. So me and my mate, like, in the suburbs now, so we're just going to take the decks down to a local like micro pub in a couple of weeks and play there. Yeah. Because it's about whether you can play records or whether you have to take digital so that you can kind of meet everyone's needs or not. If it was up to me, ideal world, I'd probably go somewhere once a month, play for about 5 hours playing records. Yeah. That'd do me.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the need for, like, remember like the Plastic People sort of venue where it's just for heads, you know, once a month, someone plays a deep set. And that's it. And the freedom is to actually, you know, and having Ade come along and go, no, hold on, you can't play it on this needle. You need this needle to play this record. That level of connoisseurship is always going to be valuable. And I'm sort of inspired by the Japanese in the way, you know, like the way they have their vinyl clubs, where essentially because of the scarcity of records in the 1920s and 30s, whatever, everyone would gather together to buy a record and play it together in the room. So you'd all hear it socially.
I didn't realise that was how they came about.
Yeah. So poverty. Yeah. So imagine you and your mates could only afford the one Monk album shipped in on Blue Note from America. And so you'd have it and play on the nice rig, and then with your whiskey, and everyone had to shut up and listen to it because you've taken out an hour of your life to come and listen to this record that night. And I think that level of connoisseurship is still there in the world. I just think it's just finding the space that will allow it to happen. You know, and my favorite thing now is the Tabernacle in West London, which is a community centre that has its own Valve sound system that it pulls out once a month on a Friday, and it's fucking heaving because the community comes out and plays in the community sound system. The Gerald, the Valves, all British Valves as well, and just like, and the nice units, and it's heaving in there. Every generation, from the 8-year-old man to the 15-year-old kid, just having it.
Amazing.
And so I wish that for all community centres, that every community centre can have its own sound system, and one day every community centre can clash. You know what I mean? Whether it's, you know, from Scunthorpe to Dudley to Tabernacle, we have a cup clash. Who's the best sound system in the country? And that'd be amazing. Yeah.
I think these things, it's like looking at how do you get back the community that you had back in the 80s or whatever. It's kind of through the digital revolution and social media and then the lockdowns and stuff like that. It feels to me, at least, like communities kind of eroded. Yeah. So it's like, how do we rebuild it again?
Yeah. And I think for the engineers that are building sound systems, I've seen that their basic thing now is batteries, where you can build a sound system, a big fuck off rig that you can power off a battery for 12 hours autonomously. That's the future. So then somewhere in the countryside, for instance, if you can find a nice valley somewhere, park up your sound system and just private land, just blast that shit for a whole evening and have a rave in the woods. You know,
Nice.
and that's the kind of mobility that I think is required where, you know, you gather enough. That takes it back to the 90s. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Yeah, we're going to the woods. So we're going to have a dance. Someone's bringing drinks and someone's bringing a few mushrooms and it will be fine. You know, like and then the very next morning we'll call the Ubers and go home. It's like, it's good. And as such, and I feel that's still possible. And I'm only reminded of that because I was in Jamaica recently and you're up in the hills. And on a Friday night, you can hear a sound system 5 miles away because you're in deep jungle. The sound just travels by nature of the hills. But it's such a nice thing to hear music through the night. It's not like it's a problem. It's just, yeah, somebody's having fun. You know, the tunes are banging. Like, these are banging ass tunes. And you go to sleep, you wake up next day, you got no idea where the sound system was because you were in the middle of the forest.
Yeah, well, like where I live, we're in Derby, on the edge of the city. And last year when it was Download Festival in Donington, that's about 10, 12 miles away, you could hear the music from that somehow. Yeah. It's the first year I've ever noticed that. It was mad.
It is weird. Acoustics in the countryside is really interesting. But because of it, I think, you know, whether or not you find an old bunker somewhere with low ceilings and concrete walls just to make the sound system really dubby. Oh my God. You know already when you're in that setup, you're not going to bring certain records. You're going to bring certain other records because it just hits in that room better. And then if you play into a pub, as you said, do you spread it wide? But, you know, nuance is such a fascinating thing because you can't tell with DJing. You just can't tell how deep you can go and how many people can go with you because for whatever reason, they grew up wherever they grew up or they lived in New York between 87 and 92 and they know the tunes, you know, and that's playing a set in Derby, you know. So I wouldn't discount what people are capable of taking on board. It's just having the opportunity to serve these people. Or at the very least, and even last night I was thinking about it, should I just send my tape to Croydon FM and go, right, I'm going to do radio. Like, I want to do pirate radio because I've done pirate radio a few times and it is fun because you are playing hardcore, whatever you're playing, to the unknown, you know.
Yeah. Just going back to what you were just saying, this made me think like there's no better feeling than getting a good request from someone when you're DJing. You get this request from someone and you're like, they've got it, they like this music, they care about it, and they've told me something that I do really want to play.
Yeah.
So satisfying.
Yeah, exactly. And it ramps up the way you hedge you use the shape of the crowd basically. Yeah. And it's a lovely thing. And again, sometimes there are records that you can play that are a total education. Like, you know, you're the only one who's got a copy of this, and whoever hears this is going to be educated on a certain sound, and they're going to go on Shazam and they won't find it. And that's just life. Yeah. And that's just life. You know, we're going to have fun. That I always enjoy. I always love being surprised by DJs, and it happens. And I find, particularly as I'm spending more time in random parts of like Jamaica and New York, Jamaica and Africa, where you can be in the middle of nowhere and hear a great DJ play a set. To, you know, because for some reason they've got DJs at bus stop, you know, service stations. In Ghana on a Sunday morning at 6 a.m, there's a DJ at the service station greeting everyone coming off the bus. Whose idea was that? Whose fucking idea was that? And it's like, okay, this works. He's banging and he's shouting, and you go, oh, he's having it. I was like, what the? Okay, we can make it, but I don't know what's happened. It's like bandstands. I'm imagining that bandstands were built for bands to play music on.
Yeah.
Why aren't there bands playing music on bandstands?
Because you need somewhere to smoke when it's raining.
Yeah, exactly. It superseded it. I'm like, why can't DJ AJ just go to a bandstand and play on a par for 3 hours?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
And still get the deck chairs out.
Yeah, just going back to photography. Just in your book, I was on the section about Wu-Tang, and it mentioned in there, I forget the exact wording, but some of the publishers basically got you to work with artists like Wu-Tang because they were, I think the wording is like acts that they didn't know how to handle or something like that.
Yeah. The Wu-Tang fell into that at that time where it's like they couldn't work out which way it was going to go, like in terms of would they even step in front of the camera? Are they, because you might go in someone's studio and they're like, "Excuse me, Mr. Meth, could you put the spliff down, please?" Like, you can't do that. He's Mr. Meth. He's gonna need that. And so in terms of like getting them to go in front of the camera and not be arseholes was kind of like, because basically they weren't sensitive to who these kids were, or the fact that, you know, they've never been on a plane before and this is their first time sort of leaving the country, and they needed to feel safe, basically. So yeah, so they always sort of put me in touch with, you know, I could say, you know, there's something, I mean, we see it differently now, but so even people like Coolio would have been seen as, oh, we're not so sure. And I'm like, the guy's a former fireman. I think he's all right. You know, like, you know, yeah, you've seen the video and you've seen like, but that's, people are performing to a certain extent. And some people are not performing. Some people are exactly who they say they are. But again, to disarm them is part of your job as a photographer. You know, you can get on the wrong side of Jay-Z very quickly. You work not to, you know. So ultimately, it's about sort of respecting boundaries. And I think photographers back then, particularly if you, yes, some photographers may consider themselves to be bigger than the acts they were shooting, but that can happen to all of us where we don't fully understand who you're talking to or what you're dealing with. You might think it's Mr. Meth, who's just some random kid, but by that time, you know, let's say you grew up in the 80s where pop acts always seemed to wear blouses, and now you've got someone wearing camouflage fatigues. We're in a different time. So I think there was that too as well. Like, essentially, I was in my teens, late teens, early 20s. So I would be like, you photograph these wild kids because you are essentially a wild kid. And that was fine for me because I love these guys and I really wanted to just basically not hang out in a big way, but just long enough to actually get the picture and get something that for me made me think of them as I would a comic book character. Like, this is Peter Parker, this is Clark Kent, this is Bruce Wayne, you know, but somehow you can almost see their Batmans, their Supermans, and their Spider-Mans because they are alter egos.
What's interesting as well with that collection of shots, that like each one of them you've shot in such a different way.
Yeah.
You know, it's like did you have all the shots in mind before you shot them based on them, or?
I always wanted it, and I think I was looking at my contact sheet recently and I was looking at the first shot and it was the group shot, and from the group shot I realized they all couldn't be in the same picture together. That was impossible. Like, they just wouldn't do it. Like, they always had like, someone's pissed off that this guy's stolen my lyrics, right? So it was like, oh, okay, so I'm gonna have to work with them individually. And given that the first time I shot them I only had like 6 Wu-Tang members, I had to wait a good 10-15 years before I could get all of them, you know, and then have, you know, meet the RZA finally, lastly, and even Capadonna, even Young Dirty Bastard now is on camera. So you have to sort of gather them all together and then put them together as a body of work, which taught me to, especially as a photographer, to build bodies of work. Like, the core of what you do as a photographer is to have a body of work. And for me, a body, my first sort of, oh my God, I've got it, is the Wu-Tang. That's a body of work that the world would understand, you know. Let's say, I've got a pet thing for like photographing lone trees in the landscape. I just like that sort of thing. I could have a body of the best shots of lone trees in the landscape by any other photographer, but I don't have enough yet to put together a body of work of like 10 great trees in the landscape. Lone trees. The lone tree is my pet obsession. But Wu-Tang's was like, yeah, I think I've got a body of work here. I think I can do this. And so pulling it together, giving them their individual identity, and then taking the negatives to like a master printer and be like, I want you to translate these into something, a body of work. Like, because there's something to be said about being the analog photographer, is that my job is to take the picture and have the film. A printer's job is to interpret the film and make a print. And it's interesting how having a printer's take on it was to almost mold the things into really strong individual iconic images, but with a tone or color temperature that makes them all quite consistent. So nuance like that I really wanted to add to it, hence I found this printer called Danny Pope, who was a printer for Eve Arnold, also the printer for David Bailey and a couple of all the great 90s fashion photographers, who by 2010 was now a retired printer And so I felt like I can afford to have that look. And particularly when I see the You God picture with the white background, I was thinking Bailey when I shot that. So going to Bailey's printer and having him tease out the Bailey quality in it, but also knowing that I didn't shoot on black and white like Bailey did. I shot on color. So I still wanted my own sort of take on things. And again, it's back to the sort of opening question really about learning photography from other photographers, you know, rather than necessarily from a book. And hence the reason why my book is written in first person, because I didn't want people to think, you know, I'm going to use the same language that people would assume would be the language of photography, where you talk in the third person, but rather first person. This is my experience picking up the camera, taking the pictures, but also what feeds into that is your intention, and that comes from who you are, where you come from, and what you feel you need to do with this tool. And making the most of that philosophically rather than getting into the technical thing.
I suppose it's kind of like it's just sort of made me think about like when I learnt guitar. I didn't really listen to a lot of guitar music, but because I'd done other instruments when I was younger, I kind of had my head around music theory. So I kind of got all that stuff, but there was another friend of mine who probably didn't have that music theory background, but just listened to better music. And to me, was just a way better guitarist because he just had so much feel.
Yeah, phrasing. Yeah.
And I suppose it's that sort of thing, isn't there? You're understanding your influences and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is it. It's all about feel in that regards. And I think a lot, and again, it comes down to sampling. Like, I was thinking about the drum and bass thing when I met Kevin Sanderson, who famously invented the Reese bass line. You know, or he's credited for inventing it, but essentially he bought a Casio keyboard. There was a preset, and he twinkled it a little bit, and it came out with this sound. And then he used it in his track. But really, famously, it was Ray Keith that sampled it for, I think it was Terrorist on one of the Jungle songs. And that was the first time he'd come back. But it's the way Ray Keith took that sample and tuned it, because he just took a bass sound and then there's internal loops that only the S950 could do. So the chop was quite interesting. And made something that went on to become an iconic bass line. And I think it comes down to what you're saying about hearing and tuning and just being able to pick out something that's like a little bit and cook it down, which is slightly different from hip hop sampling, where it's a loop. You are literally snatching someone else's bass sound and then tuning in, making more of that bass sound so it sits on a track that relies on bass. So probably have to stick a sine wave underneath it. That was fun. That was fun to thank Kevin Sanderson for coming up with a bass line and not suing anybody for losing that bass line. It's gone now, you know, it's gone. And I would say the same thing for the Amen brothers as well, for allowing this bass sound to just run and run and run and run and run and run and run. And so be it. And the whole genres can be built on these little moments in recordings. Yeah, there's something to be said for that. Something to be said for the ear and the technical over the spiritual, which is, again, why the book is like the spirit behind the lens. It's trying to refocus everyone to sort of look at the spiritual component to things, the mystery of it all, how things come to you, like mates, friends, love, laughter, joy, pain, the sound of the crashing waves, floating on an ocean. How all those things can actually feed into you being a better musician, or, you know, like rather than, you know, allowing it to think. And I would say even going to Jamaica and just being on that island is an inspiration. It all starts to make sense, because in that environment with that sunshine and that food and everything else that island has to offer, it all makes sense. You just have to be there. And and you come away with that, and it walks with you for the rest of your life.
As a photographer, going to work with new subjects or people, you know, whatever the preferred term is, do you, or at least when you're early in your career doing that, do you feel a pressure to act a certain way in front, like you're more confident than you are, or is it always been just like, being myself, because people kind of see through it. I've definitely had things in the working world where I've tried to seem more confident and I've just looked like a dickhead.
Yeah, there's a worry that I think that's the thing. You sort of give it some, and then you realize, oh, that doesn't work. Being around like Mob Deep and thinking, okay, I've got to hold my own here, so I'm going to roll a spliff and smoke the place out and be mad cool and share it with them like my homies. And then you didn't realize at the time that actually Americans don't mix tobacco with their weed, and it's tantamount to just getting fucking killed because it's like, what did you put in my spliff? What did you put in this spliff? It's tobacco? What is wrong with you? I was like, oh shit, what a dickhead. I didn't need to be that guy. I'm already in the room. I'm good. Like, we've got this far. We're good. All I got to do is take a picture. But I tried it. I learned my lesson. I was like, from this point on, there's absolutely no need whatsoever. And that artists, specifically, I've worked with young artists as they're coming up. Everyone needs help. Like, everyone needs support. It's not about you. It's about them. And as long as you support them, they kind of support you in the same sense that, when I first met Estelle, she was in college. She went to my old college. We had a conversation in college as I was teaching, giving a talk about my career. And she was like, oh, one day I'd love to work with you, blah, blah, blah. And, this was talking about like a 17-year-old girl. And eventually she did get in touch. Eventually we did shoot. Eventually we did create a look for her that allowed her to get signed. And then when she got signed, she came back to me so we can go to New York to take some shots. So it's kind of like this thing where you realize, well, it's a long road and you're going to see people as you go along. So you're better off just helping them get there, because we can all get there together, really. And particularly when it comes to iconography or trying to change the way people perceive you. Because the time when Estelle came to me, she was a rapper who wore tracksuits and was like a young, like she looked like a grime, almost like what a grime MC would look like. And then when we worked together, she would put a skirt, heels, a shirt, custom made shirts, custom made outfits, and try to make her look like money. And that was basically the mission at the time. So you stop thinking about trying to impress people. You used to actually want to support people to help them get to where they need to go. And they're your clients then. What's impressive then is that Estelle's the client. And the same could be said for Chronixx as well, like trying to build an iconography for the music by working with him really closely to just take pictures. And then eventually that gets boiled down into the iconography. So it's just supporting him and in that regard, and not trying to get caught up in perception or, I mean, the thing is, there's greatness in some of these artists when you work with them, and you can't help but feel like you're among greatness. But equally, that doesn't discount what you do. You actually add into their greatness, and maybe they're adding to yours. We can listen to each other. So sometimes it's best just to listen and take it all in. So
yeah, were you around the early days of grime?
Yeah, I was around for the early days of grime for sure. Definitely around Lethal B, definitely around. Obviously, he blew up from the get go. Boy in the Corner, Dizzy Rascal. But yeah, it's definitely working with people adjacent to him as well. We're working with Taz, who wrote He's a Rascal. We were always like collabs. His management was quite interesting. And yes, I was around for that. And it was nice grime. They were young. They were MCs. I didn't get to the producers, and I think I would have had more fun with the producers, to be honest with you. But I was also just had a child then as well. So I was kind of not, I was trying to operate between the hours of like 9:30 and 2:30 so I can get back to school, and the grimy kids were like, they'll get out of bed around 1 or 2, but then it was a tough one. It was a tough one to keep track of them, and also because grime happened in East London and I wasn't located in East London. I was located in South London, whereas the So Solid crew was located in South London, so I could support their careers.
Yeah.
So it was because basically I knew them before they were coming up, and I knew what they needed. They just needed to be styled in the first family of grime or first family of garage or something like that. So we created that look for them, and that's why the image is in the V&A.
So I suppose like with jungle and drum and bass, I think over time it's hit the mainstream.
Yeah.
Sort of say post 2000.
Yeah.
But I guess in the 90s, it still stayed largely underground, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, drum and bass and jungle was underground because that's how drum and bass and jungle wanted it. They didn't want it.
Yeah. So was it exciting when you were around, say, So Solid and maybe other garage artists and like with grime and stuff? Was it exciting seeing something that's homegrown, that's like, you know, geographically close to where you're from and is blowing up like that?
It was interesting to watch because you can tell these were the younger brothers of the drum and bass guys. And the drum and bass guys were not interested in being seen at all. Right. Because a lot of them had day jobs that they wanted to keep and then just have their careers on the weekend. They really were like, they weren't trying to make this thing become too big. You know, they really wanted it, manage it. And also Stadium DMB, when it came, wasn't really, it was done by the Australians. It was done by other people, not necessarily the main underground, are the ones that sort of started to pioneer, you know, that bigger like sound. Pendulum, particularly the Australians, you know, they came in and like, yep, we are going to make this like this. And they did. And then they dragged everyone else with them. And that was nice because it also, to be fair, they didn't like take something over. They just opened up a new way of doing this thing. Because, I mean, for whatever reasons, they, you know, the underground stuff was still there. Thankfully for us, it was still there. The overground stuff was for other people, and it did that thing. So when garage became more commercial, it's because it wanted to be more commercial. It wanted that notoriety. It wanted to be seen. It wanted all of those things, which I didn't think was impressive. I just thought, right, and I knew. Look, I said to the guys from the start, like, guys, whatever you do in this world, get your record deal, do something with it, buy a house or something, but don't go to the Audi showroom and buy Audis. They went to the Audi showroom and bought Audis. That's the world. That's what they wanted. They were our younger brothers who just wanted that life. They wanted to be at China Whites. They wanted to be at the 10 rooms. They wanted that shit. You know, Harvey would go to all the clubs across. Anyway, yeah, do you know what I mean? All the across Essex and be adored. You know, they wanted that shit. Everyone in drum and bass would have steered clear of it. Because it's a dirty business to get into. It's a double-edged sword, you know. You can stab with it, but it will cut you as well. So, yeah, no, I wasn't happy that they were doing well because I knew they were just basically sell-out fucks, but that's just how they wanted it, and I was happy for them too because obviously you can see one of them's now become an actor, one of them's now become a theatre person, one of them's now become TV. You know, that they wanted careers and. My generation were raised that careerists were people you couldn't trust and you didn't fuck with, like, because they would never really support your creativity. They always wanted to exploit creativity.
Right.
So there was but my generation were raised by, you know, Marxist punks. So we had that always warned about the system, always warned about Babylon. You know, those same uncles that we thought were mad were now proved correct by the Epstein files. So it's like, oh God, they were right all along. Anyway. Which was, again, something that we didn't want to face, but that's just the reality of it. Those mad uncles were right all along. But they're the ones that raised me, so I took on some of their stuff. But the next generation beneath us didn't have those qualms, so they were happy to have it. And yes, I was happy for them during whenever it was, when we were taping Top of the Pops 21 Seconds, and they invited me down to the BBC to come and hang out with them because, you know, we had worked hard to get to that point where they, you know, were in the top 10. And as soon as I walked in Television Centre, the smell of weed, especially a certain strain of weed that you knew came from Battersea, was just hovering in the air, and it was everywhere. They had smoked the place out, and that was a privilege that was allowed to artists in the BBC, that you can bun down, do anything you wanted in that part of the building, because, you know, let's not forget, it was probably invented by, what's his name, Jimmy Savile anyway, because he was the godfather of Top of the Pops. So I guess anything that happened at Top of the Pops stayed in Top of the Pops. So yeah, that was a privilege. We were given that privilege. We bun the place down. And I loved that, because that was also the same day I saw Kylie Minogue coming out of her changing room wearing the Christmas outfit, the bunny outfit that she had. Yeah, good times.
Nice. And then on that note, like what you were saying about the sort of short blow-ups of them musically and stuff, I mean, you look at the oldest sort of drum and bass heads that were there at the start of it with you, and they're still, you know, there's a lot of them still going strong, isn't there?
Yeah.
Like the forefathers of that movement.
Yeah, I'm proud of those guys. You know, they all got into yoga. They all started taking care of themselves, and they're still with us. They're all granddads now. And yeah, granddad junglists, most dangerous people you can have in your life. They're connected. So yeah, the committee's still real, still there. It gathers every now and then. Has a dinner.
What's the committee?
Oh right, we don't talk about the committee, so I didn't mean to mention that. Sorry. We can move on. Yeah. Sorry, it's in the committee. If you know about the committees, it's just a popular joke in drum and bass, but you'll probably have to look it up on Wikipedia and come back to it.
This isn't all to do with the what do you call it? Them all turning the back on Incredible, is it?
Yeah, exactly. The conversation that occurred amongst a group of DJs that created a fatwa that made sure that he got cancelled, because he needed to get cancelled. And I don't disagree with it. I think the cancellation was required, and it set the tone, it set the standard. Look, if you're teaching in the class and there's one bad kid and he's disrupting the class, kick him out. It sets the other kids will then fall in line because they're like, you're serious, you're not playing. You don't come into this culture, say what the fuck you like, and then not get cancelled. You're going to get cancelled.
So what? So this was General Levy?
Yeah, General Levy said something he shouldn't have said. His behavior wasn't necessarily conducive to an environment that had predominantly run by women. Drum and bass was run by women. All the promoters that promoted jungle were all women. And so if at some point something goes wrong within the dynamics in the group, then you are kicked out. We weren't having it. So he said some things about jungle and he had to go.
Right.
He didn't come from jungle, came from a different culture, came from a completely different culture, came from ragga culture. They had their lyrics, they had their way of doing things. It didn't really atone with our way of doing things. We had to set a standard. It was set.
Yeah.
And ever since then, even other MCs who are or not MC, predominantly MCs actually, but any other individuals that would otherwise cause problems within the culture, how to damage the reputation of the culture, would have to be they'll have to find another culture to go and ally themselves with, because we don't need it. No one needs it. House and techno could do more of that, because they've got their problems too, and they need to sort of you got a clean house. You just can't have people running amok. You can't have that. You cannot have that. And some people, you can't gatekeep. Unless you can gatekeep, you have to gatekeep. You have to make sure the dickheads don't come into your club. They'll ruin everything for everyone. And there are special clubs for dickheads, but we don't go to those clubs. We know where they are. If you see a football player and a bunch of women following him, that's not your club. Although DJing in there is fun though, but that's not your club to go to. You get paid to be there. You don't play to be there. You don't pay to play. You are paid to play.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are there any particular artists we've not mentioned that have been favourites of yours to work with?
No, I think we've kind of covered it really. I think we've had a good chance to sort of talk about the best of the hip hop guys and the best of the drum and bass guys, and even the best of the house guys like the Kevin Sandersons and these different streams of cultures that all sort of kind of emerged from the 70s really. And then the photographers that go with it, we love that, contemporary and otherwise, but I'm definitely a big fan of all the photographers that care enough to document the scenes that they're gifted to document, whether they're punk photographers or even funk photographers. They sort of feed into how we see the culture, because they're there and they're in it and they're just catching that moment.
You said before, when we were on the phone, I mentioned having had B+ on here before, and you mentioned you guys are mates and you're quite similar. And I know in the book there's a bit of a joke thing in there around Black Star as well. Yeah. I got to read that bit, which is pretty cool. But you're both people that seem very politically aware.
Yeah.
And is this a common theme with photographers? And if so, do you think because you're looking at the world, you're kind of assessing energies and stories and things like that, and documenting and stuff, does it make you kind of more aware of what's going on or more focused on it?
I think you'd think that, but I think both. I think I can say this for B+ as well. We both come from a generation where we were told and taught that photography could end wars, that a photographer can go to a war, take a picture, send it back, and people look at that and go, I think it is a bit shit to napalm children in Vietnam. I think maybe we shouldn't be doing that. And then people like, and that picture still sticks with me, the napalm girl. Or in South Africa, just when the police were just every week just open rubber bullets on like kids throwing stones. And you'd feel the same way about, you know, I don't know, Palestine, for instance, or Jerusalem, let's say for the sake of argument, and not feel anything because you can't place yourself in what they're experiencing, and you know what they're experiencing is wrong, but everything else is, you're being told, muddies the waters. So if we thought photography can do that, then we're going to act that way and take pictures of what we consider to be important truths in the hope that it will educate the people that see these pictures. But that wasn't given to us anymore. I don't think we have that anymore. So in our own small worlds, in our own small universes, we try and still exercise that. And I guess I can't say, you know, whether B+ was aligned to the Troubles in Ireland, but he's from a county, he's from the South. Obviously, he wouldn't have seen it the same way, but you start to realize how media sort of speaks with two tongues. And you don't really understand it until you go to Ireland, and then you walk around the corner, you see all these monuments, and they talk about how Churchill bombed Dublin, and you're like, oh, what, you aerial bombing Dublin? What? And then you start to realize that there's stories that simply are never told. And, you know, the Irish see things one way because they consider what was done to them to be genocide. And they're entitled to feel that way. You walk around Ireland, it's littered with monuments where people just dropped dead because they had no food. And the food was shipped to England just cause. So you're aware of that. And then you're aware that there are alternative histories that maybe you can contribute to, where you tell a different story. And maybe they're just local histories, you know, even things like the carnival, where, you know, certain people might be credited for inventing the carnival, though they had nothing to do with the carnival, because someone somewhere has decided that they want to include this person into the narrative. And maybe they set up a fete in a town hall in Marylebone in 1958, but the carnival that we know is not the same as a fete in a town hall. These are stories that are just out there, and we try our best to sort of recirculate other stories, or at least align ourselves with people that do really amazing things, in the hope that rather than tell a bad story, you tell a good story. You know, that's what I think that's about, I think. But yeah, I hope one day we could sort of make sense of bullshit with a picture that literally just says it all, because photography used to be the truth. And that used to be truth to the extent that it was even evidence in court. Like, and here I have photographic evidence of you lying, sir. It's like, oh my God, you've caught me. It's a fair cop. Not anymore. Not anymore. It's all doublespeak.
Yeah, you got to be so careful at the moment with trusting your sources and stuff.
Yeah.
So some of your work's part of the exhibition at the V&A East at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah. So I've got a So Solid piece there, and I've got a picture of Chemistry and Storm. Again, I think Chemistry and Storm, Metalheadz, very important club, very important in terms of the genesis of jungle into drum and bass, but also importantly that Chemistry's put in there because they ran the label. They were the people behind the label, as well as being DJs. And I don't think it's said enough that drum and bass was run by women. And I think it's important that we have that fostered a much better society for all of us to club in. And they took care of the man them to make sure they turned up, you know, to their sets on time, took care of the PR, took care of the professionalism that drum and bass had, even though it chose not to be commercialized in any way, shape or form. So I feel like it's nice just to say that these are two label owners, but they're also two DJs. And although one of them tragically passed, it taught us about the mortality of our scene, you know, given that, you know, and since then I've seen in the jungle scene, at least certainly with Randall's funeral, the way the culture came together to give him one of the best send-offs I've seen for anybody. You know, and something amazing about seeing all these reefs around the grave, or from Reinforced to Metalheadz to all the labels having their reefs around the grave, to sort of say, like, we can now, like any civilization, we can bury our own, so our life can be lived in this culture, and something that we built. And, you know, I've seen some of the kids there, not Pink Panthers, but, you know, the new generation of kids who just take it on as a sound and just literally make jungle music in 10 minutes because they could just sample breaks that already pre-exist. And that's great. That's great. Like, it's a thing now. So that's a joy, and it's nice to have Chemistry and Storm represented. And it's so solid, obviously, because it was that time where, you know, everyone was trying to represent a crew, and I managed to get the entire crew. Certainly from the whole Wu-Tang thing, it made me realize that if we could gather the whole crew, especially at this point in time, before you're all famous, before you go number one, the song's yet to be released, that you know, you are a So Solid crew, and I've only photographed 3 of you: Mega Man, Romeo, Lady. It'll come back to me. And then now I have a chance to basically have the entire crew in one place in your local park in Battersea on a Saturday afternoon, so all your kids can be there. That's an important picture. That's part of the collection now, because it's a timestamp. It's when it all came above ground, when these local crews can become, not only were they big in Battersea, but they took over the nation and became this thing, this phenomenon. Yeah, Miss Mafia.
Lisa Mafia.
Yeah, that's it.
Is there because when I spoke to you the other day, you were going off to speak at an event, and is it kind of strange when you've got something that's about such like sort of a raw scene that's come out of an area, out of a socio-economic circumstance and things like that? People, it's like with hip hop, isn't it? People work out how to make something out of relatively nothing. It's about being resourceful and stuff. And you've got these really DIY things that then that culture then gets like academicized in a museum. Is that a strange thing, because it's like great to get the validation, but also do people miss the point?
I think the curators have a job ahead of them in terms of trying to tell a big collective story, and I feel like there is a battle against, certainly I have a battle against things being academicized, because they kind of sort of takes the fun out of it. But there has to be some negotiation between how you contextualize history and how you disseminate that to an audience. And I think there is particularly with this show, that line's been warped, in that there is a sense of academic rigor. Oh, there is academic rigor, but rather it's not about for the sake of academics. It's not for that sake. It's really about, again, trying to tell a story of a series of musical experiences that's happened over the past 120 odd years. And it's tough. And I'm not sure, you know, how music, particularly music history, is told, or how it will be told. I'm good with DJs telling it. I'm good with radio telling it. We love a good documentary, certainly about our favorite villains and heroes in music. The museum side of it, I'm not so sure about, but I like, you know, negotiations that are occurring. Particularly with this show, is the idea of having these headphones that you get when you walk in, and as you navigate through the space, the music changes. So that allows the experience to be bedded into arriving, looking, and hearing. I think those negotiations are really important, because it just adds to another way of enjoying culture, you know, by stimulating all 1, 2 senses, at least 2 senses at once, and then allowing you to walk through it and have that experience. And I think the model, because it reminds me of the British Library show on the history of black music as well. So it feels like it almost like models itself on the cross between a V&A show and a library show. So it's education meets entertainment, which, you know, kind of relies on me, the KRS One, you know, model of edutainment, you know. So I'm good with that. I'm good with edutainment. It's fun. It's okay. Give some kids some headphones, let them run around, see how that works out for them.
But it's always nice tricking kids into like learning.
Yes, exactly. But that said, I would have, you know, like I said, I've had experiences where Lee Scratch Perry's multi-track and Soundcraft mixing desk is put on display, and you can go there with your own DAT, or at the time mini disc, and make your own dubs. That to me is the future of museums. I think there's one in Glasgow. There's a synthesizer museum in Glasgow.
Right.
Yeah, and you can go there with your tape and just wire up some synths and see if we can get some wobbly bass lines out of these things and take them home to sample. You know, yeah.
Have you got any of your music anywhere online?
Not really. I think I did one track on vinyl. I think it's on Discogs somewhere. Yeah, I suppose I did. I released one track. It was I remember someone telling me, "Oh, Theo Parrish played your track." It's like, yes, finally, I'm set. Theo Parrish is banging out my tune, and then I find out you played it at the wrong speed. I was like, I don't know what to do with that, because I cut it at 45 and he plays it at 43. It's like,
yeah, but if it works, it works.
As if it works, it works. Now, even I'm trying to work it into the set at 33.
Like one of your biggest things is a scene that's based on a drum break being played at the wrong speed.
Exactly. Bug in the bass bin. There you go. Play that at the wrong speed.
Oh, just one more thing I wanted to ask you about, because I'm mindful of the time.
Yeah.
Meta glasses. Well, I suppose there's a couple of things. Meta glasses are the first one, because you mentioned those.
Yeah.
Now, what's that like as a photographer then? Because, like, I suppose you can be super candid, but then also people don't know that you're walking around with a camera.
Yeah, I mean, I'm using them right now because, but I've got the prescription lenses on it, so I can actually sort of do weird things like, make mental notes and, like look at this thing and go, "Hey, Metha, could you translate this document for me?"
Oh, wow.
Okay. And it started to go on about what the text appears to be in Japanese and what it's talking about. So it's mainly for research that I'm using it.
Right.
I would never go out in the street with this because it just looks weird and creepy. Because the general view is people with method glasses are like just weird and creepy people who just want to do just basically do weird and creepy stuff. So it doesn't go out on the road. It just works in the house or in this situation for me. And it also means that I can take calls, be in the room. It's an interesting one, but can it take it up? Because my hope for it was really about first person presentations, or how to teach first person, but it doesn't allow enough time to record like that. So, okay, that's gone out the window. But I've started sort of just having really interesting correspondences from a first person perspective. Like, what's this? Or both engaging in the same thing at the same time. Interesting. But is it a camera? No. Is it access? Is it me interfacing with technology? Yes.
Got it.
And what happens next, I do not know. But I'm starting to see that this... Because my hope for AI is that it's not about what it does for the big man. It's about what it does for us, the individual. Like, how do I train it to be working for me? So it's my agent. In other words, how do I suck in all my archive into a hard drive, not put it online, but have my own agent trained to go Adidas, Ronnie size, find the things that I'm looking for, street, like just little things, so that I can then mine, or other people can come in and mine the archive based on what I've seen in the last 30 years. And this is my way of understanding that. So even if it's like picking up negatives or registering numbers, but that's my next learning curve. If you're going to ask me what I'm going to do next, I'm just understanding digital asset management for photographers to basically manage all our assets.
I was going to ask you about that, because I was thinking about when you talk about going through people's contact sheets and negatives and stuff, is it fun for you, like going through someone else's sheets and seeing the shots that haven't made it off the sheet, as it were, and stuff, and talking to the photographers about it?
Absolutely, I really enjoy it. I've come across photographers who I've worked with in my time who've taken some great pictures alongside me, but have poor taste and make the wrong selection, or leave it up to editors to make a poor selection for them. In my case, I only shot 9 pictures of Biggie. I only made one of them work. Actually 3 of them work. So, but I chose those shots. If I was listening to anybody else, they might have picked some other random thing, and then I had to print them and work them to make them a working picture. So I kind of see the art of photography. I can see it from the negative. So I'm always happy to support a photographer in their curation, because I think it's impossible for a photographer to curate their own work. Some are better at it than others, but I think it's very difficult. I find it difficult, but I find it much easier to create someone else's work because I'm not attached to the memory of taking that picture, which so many photographers are. They seem to just, I remember when I took this, how I was feeling that day. And I can't see any of that, and I don't care for any of that. I just want to know what the picture's saying to me in that moment and translate that to a print on the wall that can then communicate to an audience.
I was going to ask you about mood, whether mood affects what the mood you're in when you go to a shoot affects what your output is and like the tone and the style?
It can do. It very much can do. I mean, you can add mood later in the print and actually cook it in different directions, but at the very least, you're reflecting the energy. The person in the camera is reflecting your energy. Like if you're going excited and bouncing up and down, they'll be bouncing up and down. And so whatever you're feeling, if they're on your wavelength, they'll be feeling it too. So you have to be conscious of that. Or sometimes you just chime into what they're feeling and just work. But you kind of ultimately you are reflecting each other's energy. And so and so it's very much it's there, it's locked into the picture, but then you double down on it. I've definitely done print and variations of prints where you just double down on the mood that's in there, either make it darker or make it lighter, will change the tone and the spirit of it. And I'm kind of playing with that now because as new papers come and go, sometimes I'll revisit the negatives by reprinting them onto a new type of paper to see if I can extract anything more out of it, or in the playing with it at this point in time, I might gain a certain insight into the negative, having played with it over the last 30 years. So that's been quite fascinating for me. And so that's what drives me to produce new prints and new bodies of work now, is the actual materiality of how to make these things look good without having to plug anything in. You just stick them on the wall, have them in a box, they just hit, and you can put them in a frame and they'll just resonate for a very long time.
Right. So one last thing then, have you got any advice for anyone that's starting out in photography, given the low to zero barrier to entry now?
I say, well, it still boils down to intention. I would ask everyone who's into photography to really check in on their intentions and make sure that they work towards that. Like have, whether it's just, even if it's something as, my favorite photographer, Charlie Phillips, is like, his thing was funerals. His intention was to document every funeral we went to, and every week he was at a funeral, and he got fed well, obviously, and that contributed to his stroke. But anyway, the idea that he and after 50 odd years, he is the number one photographer of funerals you can go to. He has the most, and the work eventually looks like poetry. It's like pathos, and the human condition. It's like we all die. It's like, wow. And some of us don't want to remember the people that have passed away, but when they do, their photographic image becomes really, really important. So it's an interesting thing to have. So I would say just set out your stall and go for it. And even if it's your own family, even if it's like, I'm just going to take pictures of the kids for the rest of my life, please do. You'll be the best photographer of your kid ever. So that intention, I think, is the key to everything. And then over time, people will associate value with that.
Amazing.
They think it's important, they'll come chasing you down the street for it. And that's, I think, the core to it, really.
Right, Eddie. Well, I've really enjoyed our chat today. It's been nice to sort of get deep with you and let it go kind of here, there and everywhere. So great hearing all your input and stuff. And I think at some point, I think you'd make a really good memoir because of where your travels have been.
Thank you. I really appreciate you too as well. And I was thinking just how you've allowed me to go deep on this conversation, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the space and time you've given me. But I realised that the format kind of lets us talk,
Yeah, this is why we have to block so much time out for them.
Yeah.
It's not pressured, and it can, like, I didn't go too intense with research. I kind of went through the book, and in a way where it's just like, it just makes me think of like little thoughts. But I think like a lot of stuff you answered before I asked it anyway. And thanks for asking about things about me and my DJing as well. I really appreciate that.
No, I'd love an excuse to come up north. I feel like I've got to come to Vauxhall for whatever reason. No, you're not north. Derby's north, isn't it?
Derby's north, yeah.
Vauxhall's the Midlands, and then Derby's definitely north.
Yes.
Yeah. So past Sheffield?
No, before Sheffield. So you got Derby, then Chesterfield, then Sheffield.
Of course, Chesterfield. Never forget that. Okay. Yeah, look, mate. I'm praying that you can find a safe space to bang out tunes. You know what I mean? Just bang out tunes.
Me too.
And that's yeah.
Yeah. But where can people find you online?
Oh, right. So online right now, I've got a soft presence. I haven't quite got into my website yet because I'm working on the archive, but I've got the shop, which I should be putting some bits online soon. T-shirts and that sort of thing for Whitsummer. And and then which is my surname, Otchere.shop. And then obviously there's Instagram, which is under my name, Eddie Otchere. And then beyond that, I think it's just trying to do things in IRL, real world walks, talks, and that sort of thing. My thing is, I'm yay close to finding a space in London where we could have DJ set up, so we could have a social space where people could gather, particularly photographers. But that space has now sort of gone to developers. So looking for a space that will allow us to just, they can make money on the bar. We just require the space to sort of engage with it in an analog way, and particularly get I don't know, we have this thing in London called CDR where producers can upload tracks and play their tunes into it on a nice system. I'd like to do the same thing for photographers, where you can come along and just show a body of work, like really push this idea of a body of work, like just a closed caption, one thing you've been into. It could be trainers, it could be anything, but those kind of obsessions make photography quite interesting when you are just obsessed. So that's the hope. So hopefully in the real world we can catch up and do things properly.
Brilliant. All right, mate. Yeah. Well, I'll let you get back to it.
Nice one, Adam. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Right, bye.